Everybody, thanks for watching. So real quick, Merkabah Scholar Society members, make sure you guys check your email for the video for the trip to Kemet. Make sure you guys watch that video and go ahead and reserve your spots. So yeah, it's a lot to get into with that whole thing, but I explain everything in the video. So make sure you guys go ahead and check it out. Also, link is in the description for people still trying to join Merkabah Scholar Society. The only way you can get this trip is to be a part of the society. So links in the description. Make sure you guys take advantage of that whole thing. Also, now available, melanin and the genesis of frequency and vibration is now available. Been a minute since I put a video out. I know a lot of people have been asking about this video, but it's a lot. It's one of my more deeper videos. And for those who don't know, my more deeper information is in those videos, the DVDs or what have you. That's on Podia. That's for sale. So make sure you guys go ahead and check those out. Also got my YouTube plaque. Long overdue. These things are cool. I know a lot of people ask me about it, and yeah, it's a whole process with that whole thing and the way that they basically don't give these things out and all the stuff that it entails is just crazy. I feel like if you reach 100,000 subscribers, you should, automatically get it, and it shouldn't be so much a hassle with it. But it is what it is. You can get these things, and I appreciate everybody over the years. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm completely fine with being where I'm at as far as subscribers. It is what it is. This information is not for everybody, but to be on here over a decade and to be consistently putting out information is just a cool thing. And I appreciate the support from everybody who's been with me since day one. But yeah, let's get into this video. So yeah, it's always somebody who think they have me stumped when it comes to biblical information. But one of the things that a lot of people don't do is read more deeper into things when they find information pertaining to anything biblical. So case in point, we have what the Septuagint Greek, as I have many videos talking about this. The Septuagint is basically the oldest biblical manuscript that we have, right? So when you're getting into the creation, the inception of biblical manuscripts, we have the Septuagint Greek. There's nothing that we find in history that is proven that predates the Septuagint. But for those people who always say, well, what about the Dead Sea Scrolls? What about the Dead Sea Scrolls? And you can go and look, and there are scrolls within the Dead Sea Scrolls that are believed to predate the Septuagint. There's an issue with that, though. So a lot of people hang their hat on that. So if you look at these, the names you can see pertaining to the different books, because of some of the context and things spoken about in these manuscripts, things that's describing stuff that happened before the supposed date of the Septuagint, they believe that these scrolls are older. But you have to remember a couple things. One, we don't have the original Septuagint Greek. We only have fragments. We don't have the original of any of the biblical manuscripts. And the Dead Sea Scrolls wasn't found until 1946, right? So that means the Dead Sea Scrolls that they found were never in circulation. This is something you can simply Google and find out. They were never in circulation because remember, for hundreds of years, the people in that region spoke Greek, and they used the Septuagint as their biblical book of what they referenced as far as the religion. Nobody was using the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls all of a sudden show up. They found them between 1946 and I think 1950 something. And, it's these fragments and you have manuscripts and there's a bunch of scrolls that, for the most part, we don't know because we're, as an independent researcher, you can't get your hands on them to do any research. And the people who have they're all under the church. They're all basically speaking for the church. And the people who quit that was working on this, Dead Sea Scrolls prior, we don't know what they quit for or what they was fired for. But there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the Dead Sea Scrolls, specifically since when they found them, they were selling leaves, pages, and a bunch of pages went out. You would think if this is this huge holy manuscript or what have you, that's, biblical and means so much to people, they wouldn't be selling it, right? So again, I showed you guys a few times how the Dead Sea Scrolls have been proven to be forgeries, fakes in a lot of museums around the world, but they attest and they hold on to the fact that the original Dead Sea Scrolls that were found are basically kept and they are authentic, which has never been proven 100% to be true. So it's what you hang your hat on and what you choose to believe. But it gets you into understanding the manuscripts and the history of them and how we break this whole thing down. So beginning with the Septuagint Greek, we have that. And we know everything basically comes off that. When St. Jerome created the Latin Vulgate and the Vetus Latina, what have you, he used the Septuagint, right? He didn't use the Dead Sea Scrolls. So what you know and what you're attributing to your knowledge of biblical history, or, the biblical manuscripts, is coming from the Septuagint, not the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we can't even really ascertain the true, sayings of what's in the Dead Sea Scrolls compared to the Septuagint, or even compared to the King James Version. If you look it up, it'll say basically it's not the same, or it'll say that, it's basically the same, but just a different translation as far as the way it was written out, because the King James Version had to be translated, and things are always lost in translation. These are things you have to consider when you're doing this research. But I have done all this research and considered all of it. The thing is, what gets you is the fact that, it's still not the original. And no matter what they find or what date you want to put on any manuscript, we don't have the originals. So it's something to really think about. Now, as far as Bibles go, it's a lot of them. It's been a lot throughout the years. And I broke down the fact that we had, 16 Bibles before the King James Version, going all the way back to, let's say, the Masoretic text or the Dead Sea Scrolls, or what we know to have existed and been put in circulation, right? Masoretic texts, we have, all the Textus, Rescriptus, and all of the codices, Codex Sinaiticus, of course, Codex Vaticanus, then Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Alexandrinus, Etham Rescriptum, or what have them. It's so many of them. And these are many manuscripts, and it always brings into question why so many different manuscripts. Now, back then, we can just say that these are manuscript copies, and copies are different from each other. They had to make multiple copies because there was no printing press yet. So we have the different copies with different names, but we have multiple copies of Codex Sinaiticus and multiple copies of these other manuscripts. So these are obviously different manuscripts. So we can't hang our hat on those either. We got to look at the context of it all. And just going through manuscripts and Bibles from the Septuagint Greek, getting into the Syriac Peshitta, and the difference of these manuscripts and where they come from, right? So there's so much to get into when you trying to figure out what to hang your hat on. And this is it. This is the problem, the issue. Biblical history, people are hanging their hats on the manuscripts, and the manuscripts have never been proven. They don't mean anything. The dates don't mean anything. They don't make what the stories say true, right? It just don't. You just got to believe. And that's the whole point of religion, is having belief and faith. None of the manuscripts, the Bible itself, don't prove anything as far as what it's saying. So we got to go into context, right? So the context of what's being said, where did it come from? And the history of it all, right? So again, we are basically told that the Bible, whatever manuscript you want to point to, is the inception, the beginning of biblical writings, or let's just say religious writings, as far as talking about an afterlife and a soul. This is what we are told throughout history. We're told in Sunday school or what have you. But as you guys know, the oldest religious text, speaking of an afterlife and a soul and all the stuff that we basically think about, as far as us, an afterlife and soul, goes back to the pyramid texts in Egypt, right? So been there in Saqqara. These are the pyramid texts behind me. You guys seen the video of me walking through so many pyramids and, being underground and seeing this stuff and walking around with this stuff and just seeing it on the walls. There's nothing that predates this, nothing biblical. This is already writing, speaking of an afterlife and showing you depictions. It's giving you so much that we don't have anything comparable to it as far as biblical religion, right? So we have to look at that and just say, then what is this? And the fact that we have it and that it's something physical versus a book that men wrote, right? So this being something that's physical, put in a physical structure that predates everything, right? Because you got to think about it. We're talking about the Bible. We're talking about Moses, and Moses being the one, and, Israelites being the keepers of tribe of Judah, what have you, being the keepers of manuscripts or what have you. And Egypt was already established. Remember, they were supposedly enslaved in Egypt. Egypt was already built and established, and these people was already ruling, meaning they already had these principles or what have you. So we talk about the laws of Ma'at, which the 10 Commandments basically was derived from. We talk about having these laws and, the 42 negative confessions or what have you. And we talk about the 10 Commandments and where this stuff could have came from. And everybody can put that together, that they will say, well, either the Egyptians got the concept from the Israelites when they enslaved them, or the Israelites got the concept from the Egyptians. But the fact that these, the Jews, the Hebrews that was enslaved, basically had no concept of their own God anyway. When they was enslaved, they didn't even know what they was praying to until, Moses came about and led them out of there. And then they still didn't even obey the God that saved them, which is why they was wandering, right? So you got to look at context. There's so much still involved in the whole thing that we can trace back to biblical manuscripts and trace back to the teachings or what the context of these manuscripts is about. And you have 4 actual history, which would be pertaining the, Pyramid of Onis, the pyramid text, what have you, everything that's there speaking about what we would say is religious writings that is real. We can touch it. We can date it. Everything is proven with that, versus what we have with manuscripts that's no certainty. We have no date that's agreed upon. We don't have anything that's talked about in the manuscript that we can pull out of physical reality and say, this is exactly what the book was talking about, right? We don't have Noah's Ark. We don't have any of the chariots. We don't have the staff of Moses. We don't have the tablets of the 10 Commandments. We don't have nothing. We don't have anything. We don't have no bodies. There's no proof, right? But we can find the bodies of the pharaohs. We can find the bodies of a lot of these people that is talked about in the ancient Egyptian stories. Not the ones that's basically mythologies. I'm just talking about as far as pharaohs that actually ruled, predating the Greek rule and Persian rule, right? Half this stuff. So you got to look at this in context to understand when you're talking about manuscripts, it's so much more than just saying this predates that. It just don't make sense. The next thing is of course, the Ethiopian Bible, that a lot of people hang their hat on the Ethiopian Bible. And I broke this whole thing down with, the Book of Enoch, and understanding that whole thing about James Bruce. And when he got the copies of the Book of Enoch, he came back with 3 copies, like 1777, after being in Ethiopia for years. And then he all of a sudden comes up with 3 copies in Giaz, which he already spoke and read, of the Book of Enoch that nobody would have been able to find for a long time. So it's all suspect with that. Also considering that he was a Freemason and that we never been able to really analyze those books he came back with. So the Book of Enoch would have been in the original Ethiopian Bible that was written by Abagarama, who was a Byzantine royal. So a lot of black people come to me and ask me about the Ethiopian Bible as being the original or the oldest biblical manuscript, and it's not. It does not predate any of the codices. It does not predate Codex Sinaiticus. It doesn't predate Codex Vaticanus. It doesn't predate the Septuagint. And we know it was written using a Greek manuscript, right? So another thing to consider. It's not the oldest. You can just simply Google that and look it up as well, and you'll find that out. So again, I get a lot of questions from people. There's a lot of good Christians out there, a lot of good Muslims, a lot of good people who I dialogue and talk with about biblical stuff, about history. And you guys know I've been doing this for a long time. I traveled the world. I've been to Israel. I've been everywhere. And this is what I do. And it's real important to me to put the truth out and get people in that right understanding, because it means a lot. Not just to be able to say, oh, I'm right and I know more than you or what have you. It means a lot spiritually. It's a big deal when you really understand what all this is, and being lost into a concept that you don't even really follow, and wasting your time with it and not really putting it into yourself and understanding yourself and what it's really trying to tell you within these books. It's a big problem. So you got a bunch of people just walking around comfortable believing that the book is real, it's true, and I'm just going to act like I believe it and have faith in it, and in doing so is going to secure my ticket into heaven. That's what most Christians believe. So people always ask me, what Bible should I get? Should there be a specific one? Everybody basically been taught the King James Version, or basically translations of it, or let's just say the revisions of it with the new King James Version and NLT and NIV or what have you. And I always tell people, you can go on eBay or you can go into a bookstore, and a lot of times you can find you an old Bible. Like this one predates the 1950s. And I always tell people, you want to get a Bible that predate the 1950s, because after the 1950s is when a lot of things was changed. So in this book, there's a lot of stuff that you're not going to find in the newer Bibles. So in this book, as I showed you guys before, it's talking about the world basically being 4,000 or 6,000 years old. And, it dates the Genesis and the books of the Bible. It gives it a date to where they believe this stuff happened. And then when you look at those dates, and this is the Bible, this is what they was using. You look at those dates and we find out that, wait a minute, we got trees older than the book of Genesis, right? We have bodies older than the book of Genesis. So if everybody was supposed to be created within this time frame, this whole 4,000, 6,000 years or what have you, then how was it people that existed hundreds of thousands of years ago and we have their bodies, right? So something to think about. Well, we have stuff in Egypt that predates and stuff in Sumer, Babylonian stuff that predates. And, how can that be if the world was just created? I mean, even if you look at it and say maybe it's pertaining to when it was written, it still doesn't work. It doesn't fit with that time because we have so much proven that predates all of it. It's long before. And then when you match it up with the timeline that the Bible's giving you, it just don't match up. So again, man, you guys got good questions, but you got to really do your research on a lot of this stuff and pay attention to the books and the history with these books, especially the 16 books that came before the King James Version and how they came about and what happened to the people that basically created them. It's a lot with that whole thing. And I break all that stuff down in a lot of videos. But, being in this position to be able to put out information over the years and having so many people listening, I really strive to get things right. A lot of you guys sent me questions about the manuscript. I put out all those videos on the manuscripts and, just how to do right research and understanding what empirical data and understand how that, archaeology even, deals with the Bible, which archaeology is telling you, hey, there is no way we can prove that the Bible is real. We can't prove it. Archaeology has never come out and said that we prove the biblical stories is true. Never. It tell you that we can't because it's based in religion. A lot of this stuff is impossible to prove. So again, it goes back to what I was saying before. You have to have a degree of faith to deal with it. That's why the book requires faith and belief because there's no proof. Archaeology could never prove the Bible. Anthropology could never prove the Bible. And it'll tell you that, when you go and look it up. So it's so much to get into. It's a lot to get into with the whole thing. But the manuscripts is what people hang their hat on. The Bible is how we got our understanding of this whole religious thing anyway. So it's what people look to, and understandably so, as to what they believe and what's their go-to in their faith, what book they tend to read. Most people, it's the King James Version. So it's the history of it all that you really got to get into to try to make it all work. And this is what I talk about. I don't like dealing in the book itself because it's not proven, but the history is true. The history outside of the book is true. And it's what we can look to and say, okay, well, we don't find this in the world. We don't find this in history, what the Bible is talking about. There's biblical history and there's actual, factual, proven history, and they don't meet. They just don't, plain and simple. And just going into Egypt itself and looking at everything that's there and the surrounding civilizations, you would think talked about the Jews, and the Greek historians talked about the Jews, and they didn't write anything on them, didn't say anything about them. For such a large group of people to have so much power and do so much in biblical history that's supposed to be real history, you would think we would see a lot more, and we just don't. So as I showed you guys, we have a proven history of the Greeks and Romans creating gods in their image. Showed you guys with Serapis Christos and them basically forcing or indoctrinating those beliefs onto the people in those countries and bringing about this faith that we have now. So we have proven history, proven artifacts that show that in the image of these conquerors, they wanted us to worship them as gods. And then all of a sudden, we're supposed to just ignore the fact that Jesus looks like Serapis Christos. We're supposed to ignore it. You're supposed to ignore the fact that they had already tried to force the worship of a god in their image on us. And then we go into Rome and we find the worship of the same deity in Rome where we get our Bible before Jesus. Matter of fact, during the same time. Then you got to look at the fact that we don't have the original manuscripts and look at the fact that the manuscripts were anonymous when it was first found. There was no Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John or names on the manuscripts until after the 2nd century AD. So who came up with these names? And I broke this whole thing down. Like, who are these people? You mean to tell me for hundreds of years, nobody knew who wrote these manuscripts that's supposed to be dating towards, during the time that Jesus was alive? And they're anonymous. So who came up with the names? A lot of people don't even know that. And the manuscript copies that we do have are full of errors and mistakes. And it just kills the whole concept of there being this whole infallible, inerrant word of God. We don't have it. We never had it. We have copies of manuscripts that they use to give us what we have today in the Bible, which we know is coded, right? Talked about Sir Francis Bacon being the editor of the Bible. He was considered one of the fathers of Freemasonry. King James was a Freemason, and that's what's coded in the book. And it's still, no matter how you slice it, to me, the greatest book ever written. And I just marvel at it. It went from it just shot to the top of my list over the last decade because of so much I've uncovered reading the book and seeing the beauty of it and seeing what they did to give us this message, coded, and why. And that's the key part that I talk about, is the why of it all that you guys need to understand. But you get caught up in the stories, you get caught up in what you've been taught, and don't go out and learn and seek that knowledge for yourself. There's a problem. They call it the Holy Bible, or people say they call it the Holy Bible because it's full of holes, right? And it is. It's a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of, contradictions within the book, but they can all be explained, most of them, when you really understand what the book is talking about in the esoteric aspect of the book, which is what I get into, as you guys know. So this is for a lot of the new people that's new to my channel that contacted me about this stuff, and I wanted to not leave you guys hanging anyway. But it's good to see a lot of people engaging in understanding the biblical manuscripts that existed before the Bible and what that means for our own Bible. And the story is, of course, that all the translations, before the King James Version is kaput. This joke. It's not good. Not a faithful translation. The King James, who was basically divinely inspired to give us this translation, well, according to the Black Hebrew Israelites. But as far as the history on it, that the Protestants basically commissioned him to do it. Now, he didn't even really want to do it, and he got help to do it. And Francis Bacon even got help, with editing the Bible, and it became what it is. But this is not something that we can even prove is this, miracle or blessing from God to give us this true translation, which is their reasoning behind it, saying that we didn't have a faithful translation of the Hebrew to English. And this is what it was about. Supposedly Rome outlawed the translation of the manuscripts in any other language but Latin. And we had the Vetus Latina, Latin Vulgate is what they was using in those codices. A lot of them are written in Greek. So, it was control with the manuscripts. And you got to think about that as well. Control for what? If it's supposed to be a book that you're teaching to all people to understand and know the message of God, why would you restrict it in any way? So it's a lot to all that you guys got to really look at. And then the differences in the manuscripts is the main thing, the differences. Because why would you need so many manuscripts or Bibles if it's the same message? So everything's the same and happen the way it's supposed to have happened in the story. Why we need different versions, right? Why do we need different books? It should all be the same as the originals, or the oldest, let's just say. And we know for a fact that that's not true. Even going back to the 2nd century, we know with the manuscripts we do have and the fragments we do have, it's not true. Now, another thing you guys got to do is find me, go ahead and find me as far as the Old Testament manuscripts to the count of the New Testament. There's far more New Testament manuscripts than Old Testament manuscripts. And that's something to really think about. And a lot of people don't even, worry about that whole thing because the main message is, people harp on as far as Christians is the New Testament manuscripts because it pertains to Jesus Christ and the whole message of Christ and being saved or what have you. So more people are concerned about the New Testament versus the Old Testament. And then that's crazy because you really need to understand what's being said and, how this whole thing comes into play. But it's a lot. It's a lot. So, I commend you guys who've been studying and been keeping up with understanding these manuscripts and the context of them and what it all means for your King James Bible and how to put it into whatever you want to believe as far as your faith. Like how does that work? How do you hold on to that faith and belief knowing all of this, problems and issues with your book? So there's something to think about, man. Like my whole thing has always been to just put out the knowledge and, we go back and forth with Christians. We have our debates, but I know a lot of good Christian people, a lot of people who have good lives being Christians or what have you, and that don't shun me for being me or what have you. you choose to believe what you choose to believe as grown-ups or what have you. But as far as the true realm of what's true and what's proven, this is where I come in at. This is where I'm basically stating facts and what's been proven. So most people will get into the manuscripts who understand that and the flaws that come with them, and they still choose to believe. And some people don't. Some people use it as a way to figure out what's really going on. Because when you dive into the manuscripts and you start really getting into the history of everything, it's tough to segue out of it. There's a rabbit hole, and you go deeper and deeper into it the more questions you ask and the more you look at actual history. And that's the key. They try to get you wrapped up in this biblical history and you're missing actual history. And then, you caught up in the faith of the belief that you're not paying attention to a lot of the crazy stuff that's being said in the book itself. The craziness of the God of the Old Testament. And the stuff is just weird. The fact that it's condoning slavery, and how are we supposed to believe in us praying to this God, as black folks, when we didn't receive any remedy throughout the hundreds of years of slavery, when we were supposedly worshiping the same God? How are we worshiping the same God when their God is giving them power over us and answering their prayers as far as keeping us enslaved and using us to make riches, where we were basically being raped and castrated and murdered, still praying to the same God? It's just stuff we got to think about. As black people, we look at things different than anybody else. And I would think you would, but a lot of black folks don't. We are the majority who are believing in this thing. But, if you choose an alternative point of view or viewpoint, these are some of the questions you're gonna run into. So you have to look at that, and the fact that we don't have the originals, the fact that the oldest New Testament manuscripts are anonymous, and the controversy surrounding who gave the books their name, the flaws, the mistakes, the errors in the book that's supposed to be infallible and inerrant, when clearly there's errors, right? So it's a lot to look into, a lot to get into. But yeah, I just want to get into this whole thing and touch on it and answer those questions. It's going to be some people who don't want to accept what they're seeing with their own eyes, and that's fine. But it's like if you want to be true to yourself and true to your spirituality, I would say do the work. Read the manuscripts, read the books, do the research, look at actual history, and compare it. What can be proven versus what can't be. There's just common sense things that's just there, and I know a lot of people like to use common sense when it comes to religion, but it's just stuff that's just there, man. It should spark something in you to search, man, to move forward. And if it don't, then you're just where you're supposed to be. This is your role. This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be faking what you believe, because there's a fakeness to it. And it's one of the things that we poke at Christians with, because we know, if you're on YouTube, 9 times out of 10, you're not living, right by that Bible, and you don't even know how. You just think, oh, well, I can just repent, when a book telling you clearly you can't. You're listening to what the preacher's saying, and that wasn't actually in the book. Hebrews 10:26, right? So you're taking verses and making it fit what you want it to fit, so you can continue to sin or believe in the book the way you want to believe in it. So there's that. It's this scared fear context to it all, where you have people believing in something that they don't actually follow due to fear they're going to lose their job, fear that things are going to go wrong in their life, and they're not being true to what's actually going on. And there's consequences to that. And you don't understand the consequences because you think you and your religion and your belief system is bigger than what we're talking about, because what we're talking about as far as conscious people is not at the forefront. Then you talking about a book that you believe is true that says that Satan is the God of this world, but yet the world is giving you the book, right? Think about that, right? Satan is the God of this world. What is it talking about? What can that mean? Well, how come government is government, and the government is basically going against the Bible, making gay marriage legal, allowing all these TV shows to openly worship Satan, and everything that's completely against the book is our government that's supposed to be ordained of God is going against the book. What's going on here? Satan's supposed to be the God of this world. So how am I believing the world, even though the Bible says don't basically, be in this world? Don't follow certain things, what have you. You're not supposed to even be dealing with people who don't believe or dealing with situations that's outside the, let's just say the laws of the Bible. So a lot of stuff that you're into, TV watching, certain, let's just say sports or things that you do in your daily life, if you really dig into it, it's against your religion, but you still do it. So yeah, it's not semantics. It's not things you can really poke at and say, oh, I don't say that, what have you. It's you interpreting what you want to interpret to fit the sin that you love doing, plain and simple. So it would be better for you to come into the right understanding and get yourself out of that guilt and, fearful situation, and just know what's actually going on and what this book is actually trying to tell you and what it's really about, plain and simple. But yeah, thanks for taking time to watch. Make sure you guys grab the new video, check it out. Scholars, make sure you guys stay tuned. A lot of videos coming to the app. And yeah, we got a lot coming up. So yeah, see you guys next video. Peace.